Al. Welcome to Around Town with Rotary. This is a monthly show to keep you informed of all the great things that the Beverly Rotary Club does for our community, and also keep you apprised of upcoming events and programs that we typically run during the course of the year. I'm Al Temkin. I'm going to serve today as co-host along with my partner in crime here, Mr. Mike Harrington. Mike?
Well, thank you, Al. Great to see you. We have a very special guest here today. Our guest is Andrew DeFranza. Andrew is a member of the Beverly Rotary Club. He's also the executive director of Harbor Light Community Partners, and we're going to learn quite a bit about Andrew today and his role at Harbor Light, and it should be a terrific show. So, welcome, Andrew. Good to see you.
Thanks. Good to see you guys.
Hey, before we get into your career, we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about your job and things like that. Let's just find out a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up, and where did you attend school, and that type of thing?
Sure. I think as a lot of people probably know, I'm originally from New Jersey, so a pretty hardcore Italian working class guy from New Jersey, which is true. So I grew up there, big Giants fan, go Giants, and actually, I went down south for undergrad. I went to a small sort of religious college in the South. College was not really a part of my community experience, and so we weren't sure where I was going to go. So literally, I picked the college on the list of colleges my parents were looking at that was the cheapest, and that did not involve, I didn't have to wear a collared shirt or something like that. Went down the list, okay, I'll go to this one, which was consistent for us. And so I was in the rural South for a few years. There were not, as you might imagine, many Italians there, so they weren't quite sure how to handle that. And then so I did theology there, sort of a lot of why questions, and then I actually went to seminary, though I generally don't admit that in public, though I suppose putting that on television then would be not the greatest idea. I went to seminary and did theology and ethics there, again, a lot of why questions. And then at that point I was doing a lot of social work type stuff, and so I went back to school and did community and economic development, and that's where I learned how to deal with housing finance and organizational management and that sort of thing.
Well, great. Give us a sense of some of the career stops along the way, the jobs you've held, and what kind of led you to end up here in Beverly?
Yeah, so it's an interesting beginning. I guess I started out, actually, I was working at a Boys and Girls Club in a public housing development in an after-school program, so doing a lot of tutoring and mentoring for kids. At the time, I had this very big old Mercury, huge boat of a car. You know, you could feel it sway in the road. And this was a long time ago, so you probably couldn't do this now, but I would have, 8 or 9 kids from the neighborhood were all in this car, and couldn't even find kids. The car's so big, somebody's under the seat. And they love that, right? They love that. I come through the neighborhood, pick kids up, and get them where they needed to go. So that was pretty early in the day. In one of my earliest gigs, I actually worked second shift weekends at the homeless shelter across from one of Trump's hotels in Atlantic City. So I worked second shift Fridays and Saturdays. And one of my main jobs there was to make sure that the guys, there's about 100 homeless guys, I had to make sure they got in the shower and then make sure they got out of the shower. So everybody had a shower, but they only let them shower for 3 minutes. And so I was like a carnival barker in the hallway, right? Billy, you got to get in the shower. And then the other guy wouldn't want to get out of the shower. I have to say, don't make me come in there and get you. I'm going to be wet. You're going to be embarrassed.
It sounds like glamorous work.
It was. It was the best. I was 23 years old, and thankfully I had a beard and a receding hairline, and so I didn't seem quite as young. And so that was one of the big ones. And then I came up to Massachusetts to go to seminary, and I actually took the outreach director job at Beverly Bootstraps when it was in the basement of the church on Cabot Street, the First Baptist Church. So my office was in the very bottom of the steeple, which had heat that sort of worked and sort of did not work. And so it was freezing in there, and that's where I really that's when I started meeting a lot of people from Beverly, and that's 20 some odd years ago now. So.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so I happen to know personally you have a beautiful family. So let's tell the viewing public a little bit about your family.
Sure. So I'm married to Dr. Kanam McKenzie, who just won the Ward 2 school committee election. So
luckily for Beverly.
Many thanks. Thank you. Well, and many thanks to the people of Ward 2. That was a great election for her. She's a brilliant, lovely person. She actually just moved, people may know this, she was at Boston University for a while and has just moved in the last couple of weeks over to run a new program at Tufts University. We have 4 kids, all girls. And so they definitely keep me going. I've done a lot of transportation in the last week. Somebody has to get to here, to get to there, to get to there. And so you're usually tripping over one kid while you're bringing another kid somewhere where they have to go. So yeah, we're busy and delighted.
Well, talking to two guys that have children and now grandchildren,
Yes.
we're kind of familiar with
I figured you would
the
be.
hustle and bustle of all of
I
that.
figured you would be, yes.
Absolutely. Talk a little bit, if you would, about Rotary, Andrew. How did you get involved with Rotary and
Yeah.
all of that? Who kind of introduced you to it? How long have you been a Rotarian? Those kind of things.
Yeah, so I left, after I was at Bootstraps for about 5 years, and then I left to go to the Midwest, and I ran a pretty big homeless shelter in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for a few years. And when I came back, I viewed it sort of as coming back home to Beverly. I wanted to come back home, so we came back, and I took this job with Harbor Light. And at the time, I thought, well, Rotary will be a functional necessity. Right, it'll be something you need to do to be involved in the community, but I had no knowledge of who it was, what it was. So Don Kelly, our longtime friend and recently departed, was my sponsor. And I knew Don and Meg from back in the day. They were on the board at Bootstraps, and so we used to partner to help different families at the time. And so I knew them, and Don was on the board, and Neil and Douglas, who's sort of the patriarch of Harbor Light,
Our friend Neil, absolutely.
was on the hiring committee for when I took the job at Harbor Light, and he was also a Rotarian. So I said, guys, what do I do here? Is there a secret handshake? Do I need a special wristband or, some kind of socks, or what is it that makes the knock or whatever? And they introduced me to everything and brought me along, and it was delightful.
How many years ago was that?
That was 2008, so I guess about 13 years ago.
yeah.
And
Oh, good.
it's
Well, it's fun to hear how people get introduced to Rotary. Some people come from Rotary families where they have some familiarity. Other people,
None.
like me, knew nothing about Rotary, but someone invited you to participate, and all of a sudden you start learning about it. So good for you.
That's it.
So you've been in Rotary for 13 years now. What are some of your activities or committees, things you've kind of been involved in?
Yeah, I was involved in a few different things over the years. I was on the chaplain committee, so did a lot of the prayer work. Was on the Rotary International Foundation, which I think is one of the more compelling things we do. That's maybe less well known. And then on the sergeant routine for about 10 years, where we get to crack jokes and collect money and gently abuse and make fun of people, which is a lot of fun.
Sometimes not so gently.
Sometimes not so gently.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
tend to be gentle.
Yeah, you are, yes.
Yeah. So what are some things you like about Rotary? What are some ways perhaps that Rotary kind of plays into your other life and maybe some intersections that could be helpful?
Yeah, I would say I like and did not expect to like. I think the friendships are authentic, and I think the word I would use is nourishing. Like, there was a way in which I thought I'll have to go to this thing, I have to manage it, show up, and what I didn't expect is to start to anticipate going and wanting to go as opposed to needing to go, which I think is a pretty common experience in the club. People are,
Yes.
the relationships are real, and they're happy to see each other, and then they tend to fan out beyond the club. We spend time outside of the club meeting. So I think the camaraderie and the friendships of people, the goodwill in the community is the thing I like the most about it. It feels like a place that's safe and encouraging, and you feel a sense of belonging and purpose. And that's pretty excellent. It's a pretty excellent thing. You asked the second. Intersection.
Well, yeah, just how maybe being in the Rotary Club and interacting with that community of people maybe helps you or affects your role at Harbor Light.
Yeah, there's a lot of interaction actually in two ways. One is, oftentimes you need somebody with a particular skill or a relationship or a business, because you have maybe I need an appraisal done, or I'm looking at a site to build some housing, or I need somebody who knows the politics of a certain community. And so it's a good base from which to start to say, all right, who do I know who knows this thing I need to know? And a lot of times that's somebody in the club that that has a relationship. It also is beneficial because there are clubs all around the region. And so if I need to go, for example, 2 weeks ago, I was in Rockport at the Rockport Rotary because we're working on a project there, and they wanted to talk to us. So I can go to any club and be sort of known and verified as being reputable kind of out of the box, and that's very valuable.
Oh, terrific. What are the types of organizations or things you involved in maybe outside of your job at Harbor Light? Do you have any other charitable organizations or boards you sit on or things like that?
Yeah, I'm not on any boards at the moment. I've been on the Beverly Rotary Board a couple of times. In the last 10 years, I spent most of my volunteer time with the kids' sports. So I coached youth soccer for about 10 years. and then basketball for about 3 years. And so most of it was coaching and games, and that was where most of my volunteer energy went when it wasn't Rotary related or Harbor Light related. There's been a few other boards I've been founding members on over the years or participants on, but that's since the kids were born, that's mostly what it was.
Oh, good for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to put you right on the spot
Do
right
it.
now, because
Do
that's
it.
what I'm going to do.
Do it.
You were doing some of the prayers that we typically do before lunch on Thursdays.
Yeah.
Haven't seen you do that in a while. You were one of the better sergeants, if I say so myself. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
Mike would agree.
I think that's true.
I think that's true. Yeah. You're not doing that anymore. So, I mean, and I know you're a very busy guy, because as you know, I serve on your board. But we need to get you back doing some of that
I
stuff.
appreciate that.
What
I
do we
appreciate that.
do? How do we make that work?
Yeah, I think, interestingly enough, I think there was a time in which somebody referred to me as the third funniest sergeant. So I think it was supposed to be Bob Murphy, maybe it was Don, and
Yeah,
me or
and
something.
probably
like
Brian
Well,
Murphy.
Thad,
Yeah.
Probably
maybe,
Brian.
yeah.
Which I challenged, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Naturally,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Who wants to be third
Who
fiddle
wants
to
to be
anybody?
third? They meant it as a compliment. I was very offended. But, yeah, so I think I'm happy to do any of those things again. I think for a while, the last few years, was so much compression in a variety of sort of personal, professional, COVID-related ways. I'll tell you, I felt like it was hard to be funny, which was interesting, or hard to be pondering on sort of the chaplain front, and so there was a lot of stress, and so it was difficult. So hopefully we're all starting to rejuvenate a little bit and come out of that, and we need humor, and we need the solemnity or support of certain kinds of prayer, or
We
spiritual
certainly do,
practice.
and we certainly need to be around each other, because that's
yeah,
what we want.
yeah, we do.
Right,
Yeah, we
we're
do.
social people.
People are eager,
Right.
very eager to get together. So
Yeah, people are a little zoomed out.
Yeah.
Virtual interaction does not replace
no,
traditional interaction.
No.
So luckily, we're starting to inch towards back to normality.
I agree.
So
I
it's
agree.
all good.
I agree. So I'm
Oh,
happy
sure.
to think about that again, Al. It's
Awesome.
Good point.
Since you've said that, now I'm going to make something happen. So
You
I
should-
just
I
just
assume.
want you to prepare yourself.
I assume it's going to
Yeah,
be
so-
hilarious.
Be careful what you agree to.
Yes. Yeah.
The Rotary, because it becomes a legacy.
It does.
You know.
It does. Yes. I thought you were going to say wish for, and I was
Yeah,
going
well,
to
take it from a
clarify.
guy who's done
No.
fundraisers for 18 years in a row.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
every year is going to be the last year, but it doesn't work out that way.
Yeah,
so.
it was the last year, the first year I started. You were saying it was the last year.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
I can attest to the fact that Mike says that's an annual thing.
Yeah.
It's an annual thing,
Yes,
yeah. But we're not letting him go, because he
Yes.
does a great job.
Of course. Easy to
So,
find them.
For sure. And at this point, I think we're going to take just a quick break to share a video with you that kind of, you'll see some education about some of the great things that our Beverly Rotary Club does. Please stay tuned.
We raise a lot of money for Beverly organizations.
And they bought us our refrigerated van.
They made a significant contribution to the restoration of Ellis Square.
They helped us house a family experiencing homelessness.
They bought us our bookmobile.
They were actually the first ones to donate instruments to the high school band.
They bought oxygen masks for our rescue dogs.
They helped buy our school bus.
They fund the annual Brad Gage Ice Cream Social at Lynch Park every summer, and they even scoop the ice cream.
Since 2014, they've supported the Cabot, funding preservation of this historic gem.
They helped to fund the Council on Aging van.
They were a major donor to our new infant toddler playground.
They bought an emergency generator for Harbor Light House.
We funded and built the gazebo.
And we've got a green thumb.
A lot of green thumbs.
A lot of green thumbs.
Not to mention sculptures.
We planted more than 100 trees last year.
They donated a shuttle bus stop that brings veterans to the VA hospital in Bedford.
We're going to buy a water drone to clean plastics out of Beverly Harbor.
They make a big difference for United Way.
We give up to 8 scholarships.
8 scholarships every year since the mid-1980s.
And I was a recipient, and thanks to their help, I was the first in my family to go to college.
It's more than just a local organization.
There are 33,000 clubs
In 200 countries with 1.2 million members worldwide.
All that good adds up.
Those do-gooders just keep doing good.
We funded 13 wells in Kisumu, Kenya, bringing water to 13 schools.
We contributed to Kalusha School in Pakistan, and later to the construction of a fabulous women's college.
Hi, I'm Izzy Polito. I'm Mirabella Polito.
and we're all youth exchange students.
We started the Youth Exchange program 13 years ago, partly because I was also an exchange student in 1979.
I'm Aku. I'm from Finland. They hosted me as exchange student.
We funded Dr. Gordon Sato of Hamilton, who devised a way to grow trees in salt water in Senegal, Mauritania, and Eritrea.
Our club has funded at least 20 life-changing surgeries around the world.
And we've participated as non-medical volunteers
in the Philippines,
in Bolivia,
and Venezuela.
And remember,
Since launching the Polio Plus campaign over 30 years ago, the number of polio cases worldwide has dropped 99%.
In 2019, clubs in the district joined the Polar Plunge to eradicate polio. The clubs raised $90,000. Can we get back to Beverly, please?
Over the past 10 years, we've raised, probably about $100,000. Try $400,000.
Over the past 10 years, we've raised over $1 million.
I have made some wonderful friends.
It's downright inspiring.
it's an important part of my week.
It's a very important part of my week.
Sometimes it's the best part of my week.
It's one of the best things I do.
Even if people still ask about the secret handshake.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here today talking with Beverly Rotarian Andrew DeFranza and Executive Director of Harbor Light Community Partners. Let's go there now at this point and tell us a little bit, if you would, Andrew, about Harbor Light, its mission, how it got started, that type of thing, please.
Sure. No, it's a great question and a broad one. So Harbor Light really exists to create housing opportunities for people that would otherwise be economically vulnerable on the North Shore, people who wouldn't be able to afford to be here, our employees and workers, our retired seniors, people with disabilities, people that have struggled maybe with homelessness. Our purpose is to create space for them that's sustainable, viable, high quality, contributes to the quality of their life and opportunity, and stabilizes where they can live and be. And so interestingly, in terms of start, it really started with the First Baptist Church in the 60s on Cabot Street. They started some housing work as a part of their social outreach mission, particularly for seniors. And out of that sprang Harbor Light House, which was the earliest of our projects downtown, which is for seniors. Interestingly enough, the church at the time voted to buy a couple of old Victorian buildings downtown to create this housing for seniors. And it was a pure democracy vote. So they voted 62 to 60 to buy those buildings. So if it wasn't for those two votes, we wouldn't have made it. My understanding at the time is the Reverend John Wilbur, who a lot of longtime Beverly residents would know, was whipping votes late into the experience. And so we're lucky that he got those two extra votes.
Wow.
So Turtle Creek and Turtle Woods up off of Route 22, which a lot of people have known and have had family live there, was also part of that. About 12 or 13 years ago, we had a number of organizations that were related, and then there were a lot of other housing organizations that had been created in the community. So Stella Mae Siemens and our own Joe Lumino, Rotarian, had created We Care About Homes, and I was on the founding board of a group called Beverly Affordable Housing Coalition about 20 years ago, and then another one out of Newburyport called the North Shore Housing Trust. Bob Gillis from Cape Ann Savings Bank and I were on that group. And so those groups, there were a lot of different sort of disparate groups, but the work was getting more and more complicated. And so we ended up about 12 years ago creating a merger of a bunch of the housing groups locally, and that's what turned into Harbor Light Community Partners. We changed the name and the board and the purpose at that time. And that's sort of where the history came from. Aggregated all of those groups, created more power. The idea was locally we wanted the capacity to be able to respond to our own housing needs, not have to rely on somebody out of Boston or from some other place. We wanted to be able to keep that at home. So we do a variety of things, which we can talk about based on where you guys want to go with this.
Sure. Now, you, as I mentioned, you are the executive director. So can you tell our audience, what exactly do you do? What role do you play, and who do you interact with?
Sure.
And how does that happen? And that type of thing.
Yeah, that might be a natural, a pretty common question. What exactly do you do? That might be something that comes around a little more often. And it's changed over the years, right? But so my role tends to be a lot of outward facing. So I do a lot of the politics stuff. So spend a lot of time with the state level and local community politicians. I tend to do most of the permitting and community work if we're doing something new. So if we're doing a new project and we have to talk to the neighbors and the city officials and other technical people about what it is we're going to do, I tend to try to be the person who's involved in that effort. I'm involved in a lot of the philanthropy work and the fundraising, and then in a lot of the advocacy, either locally or at the state level for affordable housing friendly policies. So I might testify at the State House in favor of some particular piece of regulation or bill, or at a community level around a particular kind of zoning to try to encourage, all at the end of the day, to try to make sure there's more housing available across the economic spectrum that's economically accessible to our workers, to our seniors, those with disabilities, anybody who will be vulnerable.
And word on the street is that you're pretty effective at it. A story just came up recently of some meeting you were at somewhere. I don't even know where it was. And there was somebody that was arguing about a fence or something, which, as I understand it, is already there.
Yeah.
And you basically said, we're going to give you a fence.
Yeah.
So I guess you ended up building a fence in front of the fence.
Yeah.
To satisfy that need.
Yeah.
So that's pretty,
yeah, we try to
get it
trade.
done.
Try to trade
Sure.
whatever you can. Sort of, sometimes we take the Rocky Balboa approach to permitting, which is you let people sort of hit you in the head enough times until they get tired.
Rope-a-dope,
and then hopefully you're still standing up. Yeah.
That's funny.
Hey, we're going to talk about the pandemic in a minute, because obviously the last 18 months have been so challenging for so many people, and I'm sure it's been for your organization as well. But aside from that, what are the biggest challenges you face in your role? What are the things that kind of keep you up at night when you think about my role and things you do every day? Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. We really, in terms of chunking out the work, we really do 4 things, right? We develop housing for people that are economically vulnerable. We operate it. We're one of the only nonprofit groups of our kind in the state that run their own housing. We do a lot of services for folks that are elderly or homeless or disabled on the sites themselves, and then a lot of education and advocacy. Those are sort of our 4 lanes of activity. The things that are the hardest, generally, there are 2 of them, although this is sort of different than COVID, which we could talk about, but generally the 2 hard things are land use regulations. How do you get a permit to do something? I think a lot of people in the community don't realize that in Massachusetts it's town by town by town or city by city that we make the rules about what gets built. And so every place where we are, there's a different set of rules. You can build housing on Tuesday for people that are left-handed, but not on Wednesday for people that are taller than 6 feet. It's sort of things like that. So that's very difficult to navigate. And access to capital. So there's, for our work, we have to finance all this stuff with some very sophisticated mechanisms. And there's always a finite level of capital to do it. So your need level for people who need the housing is here, and the resource level is always here. So those 2 things, land use and capital, are the hardest. Oh, goodness. So then all of a sudden, 18 months ago, COVID, comes on the scene. And that probably added more wrinkles to make your job even more challenging. Tell us a little bit about how your organization, assisted people during this period of COVID.
Yeah, it was hard, very quickly, right? Like it got stressful and difficult very quickly with limited knowledge, as you might recall, sort of the Wild West out there, because back when I mentioned land use, each community's Board of Health was trying to figure out what they did. So we have housing all across the North Shore. So Ipswich might be doing something different than Rockport is doing, than Beverly is doing. And we're trying to figure out sort of what to do. And we have a lot of elderly housing. So how are we going to keep people safe? So early in the game, we decided at the staff level, okay, the deal is we want to try to keep everybody alive, literally. So whatever you have to do that, do that. And so then we were doing all sorts of things. In the beginning was, how do we get access to medical care? How do we get access to food? How do we keep people sort of away from each other and keep people out of the buildings? So it became a full press variation on our operating model. Thankfully, we manage our own property, so we had that capacity. But we shut down common areas, shut down access to the general public to come in the buildings, asked people to stay away from each other, started to collect massively PPE. The city was great in Beverly about helping us get access to PPE, but we were getting things from all over. So Woods Distillery was making sanitizer that we were using. There was a guy on Ryle side who was 3D printing face shields for us. People were hand making masks in the beginning, all kinds of stuff. And then you may recall, we didn't know whether it was airborne or on surfaces. So in the beginning, we were then working with our friends and partners at Bootstraps and Senior Care, who were bringing in food on a cycle and Meals on Wheels, and they would drop it at the door. We'd have to coordinate that, but we wouldn't let them in. Then we had to clean everything and bring it in and distribute it. And so you were really trying to make sure, could people be safe and healthy and access food? And then as it went along, you're trying to mitigate the negative effects of isolation. So we were delivering special meals from like the Black Arrow restaurant in Manchester, or Flowers. Whole Foods, for example, gave us a bunch of flowers that they weren't going to sell anymore, and we put flowers at everybody's door. Did that on Mother's Day and a couple different holidays, because we've been multiple holidays into this now. We had a guy come outside and play his trumpet, did a little like trumpet concert in the courtyard of a building, and people could listen out the window. We had an adult woman who couldn't see her mother at Harbor Lighthouse, and so we rigged up this baby monitor, and she sat outside the window and talked to her through the monitor on the other side. So we were trying to think constantly, how do you make this, how do you keep people alive and also mitigate the negative effects of isolation? It was hard. The staff team was phenomenal. Partners like Bootstraps, phenomenal. And it worked
Well, it
out.
sounds like you really stepped up and you got a lot of help too, which you needed.
We needed.
How do you see the current housing concern, and where do you see that going?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because I think there's a way in which it's such a big problem that people are wondering about it, and they're thinking about it differently now, I think, than they did, especially as we think differently about essential workers. So there was a way in which essential workers, we used to really mean police, fire, school teachers, EMS, which is all true and very important. And we broadened that in the pandemic to mean, people that work at the grocery store, we really need them. And people who care for young children, boy, we really need them. And of course, all of those roles, the incomes that are generated by those jobs, you can't afford a place to live. And so I think people became more and more aware, I rely on this person who does this, who takes care of my 3-year-old in order that I can do my job. But that person makes $18 an hour and can't be somewhere to live with her children, or his children. And so the pressure really is that the volume of need around our workforce is so extensive for where they're going to live that there's a massive mismatch between the housing that we create and have created over the last 20 and 30 years and the demands of our workforce and our aging population. If you look at the data, Massachusetts has created infinitely less housing in the last 30 years than they did in the 50 years before. And a lot of that has to do with land use control and financing. So we're going to have to do something. What we have is a traffic jam that we don't know how we got into. But as we know, traffic jams they don't happen in a vacuum. Something goes wrong. Less lanes, more volume, accident. There are things that create causality, and housing is just the same. So we have a lot more people who need housing that are doing work or have done work that we rely on than we have housing available. So we'll see what happens. The next few years should be interesting because there's more capital available based on some of the infrastructure bills federally. So we'll be able to make more housing, and the land use rules are getting a little better. So hopefully it makes it a little less bad.
Heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
Good.
So how can people get more involved? How can people maybe contact you or learn more about Harbor Light?
Sure, yeah, they should. They're welcome to look on the website, harborlightcp.org. We are very happy to have people look at our Twitter, our Instagram, our Facebook, all of the social medias, and get onto those. We definitely are always interested in philanthropic support, people that are making land use or financial donations, very helpful. And I will say in the near term, we are taking applications for new family housing by the high school at Anchor Point. And so people should look on the website and feel free to apply. The income range is very broad, so a lot of employees are going to be eligible for that. People should apply for that. There's a local preference for Beverly. So Beverly folks particularly, employees or residents should apply. And next spring, you'll see us breaking ground at the old Briscoe Middle School, and starting to build out 91 apartments there. That'll start happening next spring, so we're pretty excited about that.
Wow, never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment.
Busy guy.
Keep those balls.
Well, the Briscoe project sounds exciting. That's
yes.
That's going to keep you pretty busy, I guess, for a while.
Yeah, that building was meant to stay up. So
yeah, it's a sturdy-looking structure, isn't it?
It is.
Well, great. Well, Andrew, thanks so much for being here today. This 30 minutes went by quickly, but it sounds like a very dynamic role. It keeps you very busy. Thank goodness we have you here in the community.
That's
You're doing great work.
Sure.
So always good to see you. Al, always fun to see you,
Thanks, Mike.
my partner in crime. But everybody at home, thank you for joining us here today. We'll see you back next time on Around Town with Rotary. Thank you.